I invite our Chief Guest, Honorable Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh ji, to do the honors and unveil the book History That India Ignored.
Good evening, everybody. Our very revered Prem Prakash ji, Sanjeev ji, and Roy bhai, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I think a week or so back, when I received a message that Prem Prakash ji wanted me to be there for the book release, I asked them to check. I said they may be mistaken because I am too small to perform that task for him. Because he's been such a tall figure and a source of inspiration for almost 3 generations of Indians, including me. But nevertheless, I think more than being an honor, it's also going to be a learning experience for a lot of us. And I'm sure everybody over here sitting in this room would agree with that. Now, this book, History That India Ignored. In fact, to tell you honestly, being a voracious reader, I have read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I still have with me, which are dedicated to the independence of India, to the partition of India, and also dedicated exclusively to the 20th century history of India. And books by different authors, by Indian authors, by Pakistani authors, by British authors, by victims of partition who got uprooted from that side and came down to settle here, including the city of Delhi, because just about 7 lakh population, 1947, suddenly overnight it's up to 11 lakh, such an influx. Also books written by the victims who had to move out from this part and there in the newly established Pakistan. Also books written by some of those partition displaced persons who chose to settle neither in India nor in Pakistan. In fact, only about a year back, a young journalist, lady journalist based out of London, came out with a collection of anecdotes after having done some research on the family settled over there in UK, most of them from the erstwhile Punjab. And but why I'm saying so is that, having said that, Prem Prakash ji had a unique advantage, and he was also blessed with a unique privilege in that he had lived history, he had witnessed history, he had reported history, and he had recorded history. So I think in more ways than one, he was qualified to perform this task. And I wonder why it didn't occur to his mind earlier. But I'm glad that he's done this now, and he has decided to benefit us with the first-hand evidence account supported by documents, data, dates. And this 253-page book is going to be useful in more than one ways. I always carry 2 books with me, even on the air flight. And that's because I pick up any new book which is available in the market, and after a couple of pages I decide whether to read on or not, and just abandon it and take up the new one, next one. So I'm glad that day 4 and yesterday, in 2 of my flights, this was a very comfortable and a very educative companion for me. At the same time, this book would also be useful for all those who wish to aid themselves with the chronology of events that led on or that shaped the face of the 21st and the 20th century, primarily, 20th century India, and also shaped the destiny of India leading up to the midnight of freedom. And particularly so for the new generation, which may still not have been touched with all that went through those who were part of that time when the partition happened. And thirdly, this is also going to be a useful reference book for all the scholars of history. And I'm sure that is going to give it a timeless value. Now, the book also has certain facts reported with, of course, evidence, which have often not been written because most of the authors have tended to look at this entire sequence of events from their perspective, sometimes also from the experiences, the kind of experiences, varied experience they went through, which may have determined their perspective, which of course can't grudge them for being biased, but each one had to go through a different kind of a nightmare. In fact, I got my Urdu lessons informally from Professor Jagannath Azad, who is no more, and he always used to tell me fondly that the first national anthem of Pakistan was written by him. And in the midnight of 14th August, when the anthem was playing, some of his Muslim neighbors came over and said, "Now this is high time, you should move out of Lahore, otherwise we will not be able to protect you." And then, of course, the next anthem was written by Hafiz Zaradari and so on and so forth. So those who have not been able to be in contact with either those who have gone through that or have themselves been, I think would also be, and many of us, of some of the facts which were lesser reported. Like, for example, in the preface of the book itself, on page number 19, Prem Prakash ji writes, "Till 1930, the demand of the Congress party was only for home rule, under the status of a dominion of British Empire, with the British monarch appointing a Governor General." Quote. Now, this is something which is going to trigger quite a few heads. In other words, means that however much the Congress party might claim to be the torchbearer of India's freedom struggle, its freedom struggle, if at all, on record, began only after 1930. And if you put it the other way, because I'm also a scientist and a researcher, the entire span leading up to independence is only 17 years, out of which 4 years is the Second War. The high point was the Quit India movement 1942, and that means only for 1 decade the Congress party was apparently active as freedom fighters. But the drum beating has successfully carried on for almost a century now. And that is where the title of the book finds its justification: History that India Ignored. And when I was reading this, the first thought that occurred to my mind was that 1930 was exactly the year when Bhagat Singh and his colleagues were being tried in Lahore court. And they were hanged in 1931. And they were precisely agitating for this reason, that it has not to be a dominion state, it has to be an independent state. So see the entire contradiction happening. I don't know how much we celebrate Bhagat Singh and others as we do others. And 1930 was this year when two dichotomies were simultaneously happening in this country. And Bhagat Singh and his colleagues found no support from the Congress party, which was founded by W.O. Hume. And in fact, when he founded it, his main idea was he was of course a retired British civil servant. And his idea was to have India being ruled by some of the civil servants who had chosen to stay back in India, along with the new emerging English-speaking elite, so that he could keep the officers coming from outside away from the reins of power. And there was a different kind of an agent and an intention over that, which was far, far away from the concept idea or desire for independence. And Prem Prakash ji uses a very fascinating sentence describing this newly formed Congress party of those times. He writes, and I quote, "It was indeed a club of retiring civil servants and emerging India elite." Unquote. So that's how he has looked at it. And he wishes us to understand what's it all about. On the same page, there's another interesting anecdote, which is of course known to many of us, may not be known to many across the country, across the length and breadth of this peninsula, is that when soon after independence, the then Prime Minister on a visit was in Calcutta, Chief Justice P.N. Chakravarti of the Calcutta High Court, who was at that point in time also officiating as the Governor of Bengal, asked him what finally triggered the decision of the British Empire to quit India or to leave India. Was it that they could not handle Gandhi and the Congress? And the Attlee's reply is an eye-opener. This has been quoted in the book. Attlee's reply was, and I quote, "The role of Gandhi and Congress was minimal, as there was no agitation by them on the horizon. And therefore, the conclusion drawn by Prem Prakash is that what spurred the British to leave was possibly, as I understand, and he is trying to put out, is A, the decision by Subhash Chandra Bose to put up the Indian National Army, B, the mutiny by the Royal Indian Navy in Bombay. Now, of course, fancifully, all the names have been changed except Delhi, still surviving, Mumbai. And the third was the massive public protest that was being witnessed across the country for these three officers of the IN, namely Shahnawaz Khan, P.S. Sehgal, and G.S. Dhillon. So, what is being sought to be made out that what was creating ripples in the foundations of the British Empire was all that was being done outside the realms of what was being made out by a small coterie of the more projected ones. Then another myth which is sought to be exploded by the book is on page number 23 of the preface. The first war of independence is very popularly referred to as the 1857 war. But Prem Prakash ji has, with evidence, sought to prove that it was not so. The first war of independence could actually be designated as the one that happened in 1806 at the South Indian town of Vellore, now a part of Tamil Nadu. And that was a protest against the British Empire for not allowing the Indian corps to use the puja sites, the tilak, etc. And in the rebellion that happened, almost 200 British officials got killed. There's not much of record in the history, not much written about it. Another mutiny also before 1857 was that of the 1824 in Baragpur, which of course is now a part of the West Bengal. Many of us have gone there. We still have those symbols and the monuments of that rebellion over there, where the protest was against, again, the British rulers about the discrimination and the negligence in the supplies which were made available to the Indian soldiers. Then Prakash ji has also introduced us to some of the names never mentioned in the annals of history, and who actually gave up their lives and sacrificed themselves at the altar of freedom struggle. And some of those names, and I'm sure many in this room would be hearing them for the first time. Sohan Singh Bakhana, Bhagwan Singh, Hardyal, Kartar Singh Saroba, and also Surya Sen from Bengal, Ganesh Ghosh from Bengal, Ambika Chakravarti, Tripura Sen, Sardar Ajit Singh. Not many would be knowing was the uncle of Sardar Bhagat Singh. And even before 1857, you also had, of course, which is better known, the Mangal Pandey episode of 1849, who again was a part of the Bengal regiment in Baragpur. Then he also mentioned about Vasant Baswas, who was hanged in Ambala in 1914. Rash Bihari Bose. I think the most telling revelation or a lesser known fact right sought to be brought to light by the author Prakash is that of Mother Lal Dhingra, who killed Curzon on July 1, 1909 in London. There was a program going on there, he was there with his spouse, and Mohanlal Dhingra from close quarters shot at him and then surrendered himself. And during the trial, he refused to hire an advocate for himself. He was sentenced to death, to hang. And when he was asked to make the last statement, what he wrote, and it's been quoted very beautifully by the author, and I quote, Dhingra said, I quote, no English law court has the authority to arrest me. And he qualifies what he says by saying, if it is patriotic for an Englishman to fight against the German, if they were to occupy his country, then it is much, much more justifiable and patriotic, in my case, to fight against the English. So he was actually pointing out a contradiction in the British law itself. The British law did not hold to trial those of the Englishmen who were at that point in time agitating against the German, if at all Germans sought to invade them or made them a colony. But it was treating an Indian under trial differently, in spite of the fact that he was, at that point of time, a citizen of the British Empire. And the most important fact, Congress party passes a resolution condemning Dhingra's act, dissociating itself from Dhingra. Gandhiji also unfortunately does. And for their convenience, Mohanlal Dhingra's family refuses to have any contact with him. None of the family members visits him in the prison till he gets hanged, and do not even claim his dead body. And then, and this is more important, and this is a record of the jail manual. In the entire period of time, there was only one person who had the courage and conviction to visit him in the jail and meet him. And his name, ladies and gentlemen, was Veer Savarkar. I think after this, what has been mentioned by a huge amount of responsibility by Prem Prakash, I don't have to say anything more in response to all that has been said about Veer Savarkar by the Congress and the ilk. In fact, Prakash himself sums up very beautifully on page number 170. While mentioning Savarkar, he writes, and I quote, Savarkar passed away on 26 February 1966, unsung for his fight for freedom, but maligned for his petitions for release. And in fact, petitions were done strategically to come out of the prison because he was of the belief that it was only Netaji's course of action or the option which was going to help in achieving the goal of freedom. And therefore they could not just waste themselves away in the prison. And he was not in agreement with this, the other course adopted by Gandhi and the followers. Another quote by Prem Prakash on page number 164, which I think is applicable even today, and I hope it is not tomorrow, but doesn't seem to be becoming irrelevant tomorrow. And he says that I quote, from time immemorial, India has never lacked in providing its enemies from within, collaborators and traitors. I said, I hope it's not true tomorrow. I'm not sure. Then he also devotes a considerable number of accounts to the hanging of Bhagat Singh on the 24th of March 1931, to Subhash Ghosh. And therefore, I think, if we go on like this, can go on and on, but to sum up, the question after having gone through the book that needs to be addressed is, if the history that India ignored was indeed ignored, why was so? Was there a vested interest? Was there a political interest? Was there a dynastism motivating it? Was it a betrayal of the declarations made by the self-styled freedom fighters who decided to not to live up to their commitment to the nation? And finally, he's also given us a handout with the 10 events that changed the course of the history of South Asia. But I would like to, from my side, because otherwise Prakash, he would not forgive me. He would say, I just read my book and read out the phrases from there. What did you do? So, ladies and gentlemen, from my side, I would just end up saying that after reading the book, the question that arises is, why, after all, partition? And while India went through a single partition, the state of Jammu and Kashmir went through a double partition. And why the two-nation theory? And who asked for partition? There was a forum of Muslim intellectuals and Muslim writers who actually opposed it. The progressive writers were formed. And both sides, in India as well as Pakistan. Sahir was one of the most vociferous opponents. Then for a while, though being with the communist leaning, he chose to go to Pakistan. And then there's a famous anecdote that his companions would keep an eye on him because every day he said, I want to go back to Delhi, go back to Mumbai. And suddenly when other companions had gone to Karachi, he quietly sneaked out of Lahore and came back to Bombay. And giving relief to his disgust, he wrote, कि वो वक्त गया, वो दौर गया, वो लोग गए इस धरती से जिनका मकसद बनवाना था. It's a good riddance. And a few years later, Faiz, of course, who was Professor Faiz in Government College Lahore, also echoed the similar sentiments. ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब गोजीदा से, वो इंतजार था जिसका ये वो सह नहीं. So the two-nation theory carved out as a separate Islamic nation was not approved even by the common Muslim walking in the streets. So it was mostly the ambition of two individuals. You could have two prime ministers, so one chose one for himself here, one etc. And the partition too, done in haste. Redcliffe was an attorney, was called by Lord Mountbatten, came down to London from Delhi. From London to Delhi, he stayed there just about 30 days. Was supposed to be very intelligent attorney, got the map, got the demographic, never travelled out of Delhi. He said it's not required, and I think rightly so, because he could have travelled at London, but he could know the population, so he drew a line depending on which community lived where, and created all this ruckus. And then, of course, he knew, and immediately after he handed over this document to Lord Mountbatten, he wrote a letter to his stepson saying that I am now coming back and I need to leave before at least 1 million uprooted people come looking for my blood. And Jammu Kashmir, as I said, had a double partition. Of course, it was a victim of the partition which was drawn by Redcliffe near Firozpur. That side went down to that side, and this side near Firozpur, Pathanpur, that was the partition which divided Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. And later, of course, when the war happened, Panditji went and announced unilateral ceasefire, and half of the state went, which is known as the Pak occupied Jammu. And that also in the immediate aftermath, in the next 2 or 3 years, followed by a series of misguided attempts to appease Pakistan. First was, of course, declaring this unilateral ceasefire just when India was on the verge of retrieving back all those areas which had been occupied by the Pakistani invaders. If they had not been made to accept the ceasefire, our forces would have retreated that in just another 24 hours, 36 hours. The second, of course, is what is being these days discussed very widely in the media. Again, to appease Pakistan, the Indus Water Treaty of 1960. All the major rivers which had histories written around them, civilizations living around them, were handed over to Pakistan. The Indus River, the Jhelum, the Chenab, and what you were left were Satluj, Vyas, Ravi, the lesser rivers. There was so much of keenness on the part of the political dispensation at that time to keep Pakistan in good humor and buy peace, which of course it did not happen. And same was the case with Article 370. I don't have to go into detail of that. But I think in the end I would justify saying that if indeed all this not happened, we had not allowed the nation to be held to ransom by the ambition of a handful of few, and if the partition would have been avoided, we would have been saved of this perpetual India-Pakistan conflict, which continues and doesn't seem to show a sign of coming to it. We would have also been saved of this so-called Pak-occupied Jammu. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we might have also been saved of the Pahalgam of 22 April 2025. Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring words, sir.
I must, before we start a discussion, I would just want to make an observation that in the beginning, Dr. Jitendra Singh said that, he was surprised that, why he was called for this, and he was being very modest, but having heard him, I think he's a very appropriate person. And he actually presented the entire gist of the book, the spirit of it, and a lot of thorny issues that Prem Prakash ji has addressed. I think Jitendra Singh ji has articulated it very well, and that explains that why in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, as we know, the PMO has been very, a very important ministry, important portfolio, and you've been, a consistent, integral part of it. Dr. Manmohan Singh had 3 ministers in PMO in lesser number of time actually, and you've been longer. That explains why you are a very important a tool and a person and a go-getter in Prime Minister Modi's team. So thank you, sir, for this. I must compliment you for that. Friends, he's also very sporty. He's been a doctor, kind of turned politician, person who actually saw diabetes coming, obesity. Many years ago, sir, I gathered that you had said that obesity and diabetes are going to be a big threat when you were not even in politics. And your words came true. Unfortunately, I would say that today, of course, the entire country is struggling, and Prime Minister Modi has launched this thing against drive against obesity. You've also been very, coming from a Christian Medical College and medicine, you are also very much concerned about infrastructure development. You started cultivation of lavender in your constituency. You've been a man of many parts. So I can go on talking about you. And the point where I was saying, he very generously agreed to be part of our panel discussion today. He had come, he had made a speech, but I requested him, so he's agreed. In that scheme of things, I just want to say a few words about Premji. All of us know, and we are grateful to God for having his presence among us. I was very fortunate. I worked under him in ANI. That was my job, and I learned a lot in my initial years. Premji is a wonderful person in more than one way. Friends, as we know, he has, in the opening sentence, he's written, I'm not a historian, but as Dr. Jitendra Singh described, he has seen history being made and unmade, I would say, in some instances. So he's been a witness. Now, there are a lot of witnesses' account can be very sometimes problematic. It can be have a kind of bias. But Premji's book, if you all of you must buy a copy and read it, he is actually very candid and very honest about his observations about politicians. There is no trace of, when he was talking about momentous occasions, tragic occasions, I gather that as an author, he doesn't harbor any ill will or any trace of bitterness. And that is something, friends, as a writer and a great writer with us, Mr. Sanjeev Chopra, who would also, but it's a very difficult thing. It's always very easy, easier said than done. So, Premji, you have done a remarkable job, a wonderful job in that sense. May I take this opportunity to request Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh ji to actually start the discussion and ask a question. So, be in a new role and ask him why he wrote a book. You asked from there. Why don't you ask him that? Or whichever question you feel like asking.
So, may I kindly request Sir to start the conversation?
Yeah.
Over to you, sir.
No, I think I'll ask the question prompted by Rashid Bhai, but I'll also add on part 2 to it. A, of course, as he asked, what motivated you to write, and B, why you took so many years to write.
Yes.
Or maybe you were waiting for some of people to get exited.
He not been a journalist, but he started on a critical note.
I was not waiting for anybody to exit. I will say that.
That's in a lighter way.
But the reason it took so many years is that something like this needs a lot of research. Really a lot of research. And I was very lucky that I had the Dean of a university in London to be doing a lot of research for me out there at the India Office Library. Because here in India, the British had burnt most of the files and they left. Because, as I pointed out in the book, tragedy of India is that it wasn't only Jayachand who was responsible for Prithviraj's defeat. We have had Jayachands all along. Look at the number of people arrested after Pahalgam. Isn't that shameful? Why? We must all think about it. Why this happens? And what prompted me again, apart from that, that's only history that we know is one of Gandhiji and Congress. But the fact is, but for the sacrifices of all these young people, we wouldn't have got independence. Believe me. And Attlee himself confirmed it, as Honorable Minister mentioned to you on the stage. So that's my reply to you, sir, why I wrote this.
And so you gathered something in Goa also, when you were in Goa?
Wherever I go, this is the one way that I spend time, because this book took a lot of time. This, I had to be very careful that every word I write is not pounced upon by somebody. So it's, everything has to be very correct. For example, Muslims were never in favor of partition of India. You know that. And when that I saw even as a child, the demonstrations in Delhi, large demonstrations by Muslims from all over India. But a decision had been made. For what reason? Cold War had already broken out. And they needed a country like that, and Jinnah, because everyone in the Congress, after the failed line, I'm deliberately saying the word failed, because I saw it in 1942. That movement didn't last long, it only lasted in Balia, nowhere else. Balia that produced Mangal Pandey also, Balia that produced Chandrasekhar, Balia that produced many revolutionaries for that matter. But elsewhere, in Delhi I saw it with my own eyes, because we were living in Chandni Chowk. The demonstrators would come, police would do a lathi charge, and it would be all over. And that's how it happened. It's the sacrifices of these people that brought us here today.
Thank you, sir. May I involve Sanjeev Chopra Sahab, author and a very distinguished civil servant. Sir, Premji makes a very important observation which he was referring to. He says that among other things, you see the creation of Pakistan had to do with a thinking of the Western powers, mostly of course Great Britain as well as America, because they saw that the rise of USSR and they needed a frontline state. So they had a vested interest in creation of Pakistan, a Muslim Pakistan, or whichever way, to kind of keep a check on India and of course on the Soviet bloc, China, etc. How do you weigh in this thing? Because you have done a lot of research. I've seen your your book on Lal Bahadur Shastri and a lot of body of work. What do you say to Premji's formulation? Premji has documented, as Sir keeps talking about, evidence-based. So it's evidence-based. He has relied on that Khan Abdul Wali Khan's papers, etc., to substantiate this.
Well, thank you. And I think, first of all, our minister is minister scholar. He used to call me scholar administrator, but I think so you are scholar minister, more scholar than minister. Nobody is very influential minister. I'm so glad that you've done.
Ji will conveniently forget that I still owe to return many of the books which I had conveniently sneaked away from the library that he was looking after before he got superannuated.
And now, one of the best things about this book is that "the" is not written on it. You see, there are multiple histories, and that is the first thing that we got to understand. Every perspective is different. And my own assessment is that what E.H. Carr had once said, that a historian looks at facts, develops his perspective. As the facts keep evolving, the perspective keeps changing. We all grew up with a set of facts which were given to us by Romila Thapar, Harbans Mukhia, and Bipin Chandra. I come from JNU, and I can tell you very clearly that that is the way history was being taught at that time, right? And at that time, the facts that were being presented made that perspective quite a sensible perspective. That was a time when Dr. Ambedkar was not included in the texts of Jawaharlal Nehru University. So I read all about Dr. Ambedkar much after joining the civil services. Now, point is that we all develop our perspectives based on the material that we have, based on the insights that we develop from that material. Therefore, Rashid Bhai, to your question, my answer would be that as I look at things today, the fact is that both factors were there. There was actually a divide as well. I mean, the fact is that the Muslim League was also becoming strong. The Muslim League, interestingly, was not strong in Punjab and Bengal, where in Punjab you had the Unionist Party, and in fact, the areas where the Congress was weak. You see, the contest between the contest was always the contest between Congress and Muslim League was in the central parts of the country, and the tragedy of partition is that Punjab had the Unionist League. I mean, the Unionist Party. So Sikandar Hayat Khan, there was Sir Chotu Ram, and there was Balwant Singh on this side, and in Bengal. We had, we had in Bengal, we had the Fazlul Haq and the other people over there, Sohrawardi. So the partition of India is actually, I've not been able to understand how it actually happened. Of course, as the fact remains that the British did have a very prominent role to play. By the time the cabinet mission plan and all these things had come, things had gone for a complete toss. But the one thing which I fully agree, and that's, in fact, I'd written there are 4 reasons why this book has to be appreciated and read. The first was the scale and scope. The scale and scope of history, because you're not starting. A lot of history books, especially, and in fact, one of the good things is that history has been liberated from historians. I mean, I'm not a professional historian, neither is he, but we've done a little bit to rescue it from the conventional history. He starts from the times of Darius. Second is the fact that he brings in incidents and events which are not in common occurrence. And third, he breaks the myth, which the Honorable Minister has already said, that yes, Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress Party played a role, but that is not the exclusivist role. So a lot of people had to get credit for it. So that credit was formulated by a set of people. So I think that is the aspect, Rashid Bhai, which I'd like to say that it was, by the time it happened, given the facts that we have, because see, another thing about the 1935 Act was that the 1935 Act included Princestan, included, all these things. That never actually took off. One tactical mistake which Gandhi and the Congress did, which Jinnah did not, was that he supported the Britishers at the time when they needed that support, and the Congress could not understand the politics at that time.
Yeah.
And the ministers already pointed out that that was a very brief period. But then let's also understand that the Communist Party of India also did not understand the way things were evolving. He's also brought in M.N. Roy, he's brought in a lot of other people. But the fact is, you see that we don't know. I mean, Faiz went back to, the look at the entire formulation of the Communist Party. Yes. For a change, the Communist Party, which should have said that if at all people are different, they are different on the basis of language. It is so surprising, it's so surprising and so unfortunate that the Communist Party of India did the wrongest formulations. And Pakistan ke banane mein, the Communist Party of India also had a very negative role because they could not understand what nationalism is, and that's been a problem. In fact, one of the problems of identifying, and that's a problem that, this gentleman in Bengal has brought out, that why are we identifying Muslims as Urdu speaking? I mean, the language of the Bengali Muslim is Bangla.
Yes, absolutely.
The language of the Andhra Muslim is Telugu.
Telugu.
The language of the Punjabi Muslim is Punjabi. Unfortunately, in all this process, we've lost a lot of things. But thank you very much, and I must compliment him for bringing in that element of Goa. Goa is a fantastic story. It's a fantastic story. I'll bring in a little anecdote here. You see, this Dadra and Nagar Haveli had already been liberated de facto, right, sir? And, for one day, one IAS officer was made the Prime Minister of the Varisht Parishad of Dadra and Nagar Haveli because he had to sign that agreement with Nehru. And the 10th Constitutional Amendment was passed by which Dadra and Nagar Haveli became a part of Goa much before Goa was liberated. So, and so when you read Sir's book, you get so many links, you get so many fantastic stories, And the best part about this book is that the younger generation must realize that there are still many, many, many more heroes and sheroes who have not been covered. So the history of India needs to be recovered, needs to be discovered every single day, and we need to keep our eyes and ears open. I mean, this Teen Murti Chowk, for example, it also celebrates the Battle of Haifa. So we need to go slightly deeper. In fact, I think this book should lead us that wherever we are, we should tell our children and our grandchildren that whichever road you're on, look at this road. Why did this road get a particular name? And so thank you very much, sir. I really enjoyed it, and it's always a pleasure to
Absolutely.
go through it.
Sir, as Mr. Sanjeev Chopra has observed, your book is is on a very large canvas. As we say there's a Urdu phrase called "Darya ko kooze mein band kar diya." कि बड़ी चीज को एक छोटी चीज में आप वो कर लें, and that is what you have done. It's a very good capsule of contemporary Indian history and politics, and gives a lot of account. Sir, I just want to bring Premji to your attention towards something that Dr. Jitendra Singh had made an observation, but I want to get your thoughts on it. You have written very well and very, I would say, with a degree of passion about Subhash Chandra Bose, his role, the way he fought in Imphal, in Manipur, and his contribution to the freedom struggle, as well as the role of revolutionaries. Do you think that it has been a very deliberate attempt to isolate them, not to give them due credit? What is you have not written why they have been ignored?
In my view,
Ji sir.
Imphal was the point. If INA, which fought in Imphal extremely well, 26,000 men were lost. Not a small number. And the problem was, the British also knew that that was the only place where they could not afford to lose. They were being helped by the Americans. This America is a nuisance, I tell you that. Anyhow, American Air Force, US Air Force, which came, those runways came to our help in 1962, all along the Eastern India. It was that Air Force which made it possible for the British to win in Imphal. If Imphal had been won by INA,
Ji sir.
story would have been different. There would have been rebellion all over India. I remember that after independence, when everybody was singing praises for INA, here was the Indian Army, which was responsible, 4th Indian Division of the Indian Army was responsible for defeat and turning back of Germans in from North Africa. And yet nobody was giving any credit to Indian Army.
Yes.
Indian Army itself was beginning to think, what the hell is this going on here? So there are many, many reasons at that time, and which I saw only as a child, young boy, but my researcher Harinder Maan has done a great job.
Yes, sir.
He was to be present here today, but he wasn't able to come. And that's why it is.
I want to add
Ji,
one
bilkul.
point, you see.
Yeah.
One of the great things about this book is that he calls a spade a spade.
Yeah.
You know, he's also identified, and in fact, you know, the thought that I always had in my mind was, you know, that Gauri came and everybody was converted by the sword. He makes a very pertinent point. He says that a lot of conversion happened because of a caste system. Because of a caste system, after the army battle would be over, and he mentions this very clearly,
Yeah.
that, you know, he would find that our troops are sitting separately, making their own khana, you know, and that sense of fraternity was not there. So one of the things. So this is a problem, and I think a historian, a good historian, and that is what I like about, what I've liked about him, is that it is fact-based. It is not an ideological narration. It is not a narration which says that everything is good about us. It's a narration which also points out that, look, these were the difficulties. I think it's a very important point which he made in that
Absolutely.
book, and I thought it's important to bring this up because our faults, our own internal inconsistencies also have to be brought out, because if we don't bring this out, we will not be able to we'll not be able to rectify the mistakes that we made in the past, and we might, you know, continue doing that. So
After 1857, the British realized that when they worked out the whole thing, what happened? First thing they did was that Hindus and Muslims had to be divided, because the Hindus and Muslims had fought together against the British. In 1892, they decided again that Hindus had to be divided. And that's where they struck the caste. Caste is a deadly thing in Hindu civilization. I mentioned about the early battles that would take place in Afghanistan, which was then a Hindu country, a part of India. What was the number of people? Small population, maybe 5,000 that side, 6,000 this side. In the evening they could see each other. They would be all sitting together and eating in one thali. But this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, according to caste. And even when the victorious troops would go back, the welcome back in the city, they would be back to the same dirty jobs. They were not honored. This continues to be the problem. And it's at that point that the British felt, divide them, Hindus will fight amongst themselves. Unless we finish the caste system, I don't know whether we can progress or not.
Yeah, yes, I think that. Bilkul.
Just to what is gathered from the conversation so far, I think Premji has been very kind, nevertheless, to Gandhi and the team. Because I was restraining myself to make an opinion, but I have been always of the firm belief that Gandhi's Quit India movement succeeded because Bhagat Singh had got hanged in 1930. And that was the turning point. when Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and others got hanged, there was an uproar all over the country. Congress had to do rethinking. They had to fall in line. And that facilitated, the so-called non-violence was facilitated by the violence. That's a sentence I very fondly always say. The non-violence of Gandhi found its success because of the violence that was subjected on Bhagat Singh and others. And as far as the partition is concerned, I think the single most important factor which triggered was the personal ambition of Jinnah and Nehru, which facilitated Lord Mountbatten's design. Because once it was realized that British Empire had to quit India, they wanted to leave a weak India. And in fact, Mountbatten initially had toyed with the idea of having three parts: Hindustan, Pakistan and Princesstan. And then of course, Patel also had a role in not letting that happen,
Yes.
which of course again doesn't find mention much in the history. But nevertheless, now when this, so if the two individuals' ambition had not triggered that, maybe it might have held back Mountbatten's design. So it facilitated the British design. And finally, I think, yes, I agree with Sanjeev. Much of the harm to history has been done by the historians. Just as Mark Twain once said in the context of economics, the economics is too serious a subject to be left to economists. And in fact, Francis Bacon once said the greatest harm to the cause of literature has been done by the teachers of literature. They feed children in those donkey classrooms to mug up Macbeth and Hamlet and don't look beyond that. But yes, though that's a different perspective. But I think when I was saying that there's a utility of this book for each one of us in each section, I think what I should have said, maybe I was little inhibited in saying, that being a veteran journalist himself, this book has a great lesson for the journalist community itself. So I had the opportunity of toying with this field of journalism also for a while. And the dictum in those days was, reporting is sacred, comment is privilege.
Absolutely.
So the entire comment was reserved for the editorial page, and each one of us knew that so-and-so paper follows so-and-so ideology, and you would not grudge that. Unfortunately today, the journalist does comment more than the reporting, and judgment more than the relation of the facts. So this book has been, as Sanjeev put it in his own way, there is not an iota of bias, which sometimes happens because from an individual who's been in the field of journalism, who has had his own experiences, might have also sometimes had certain likes and dislikes, which of course in the course of time get overtaken or overcome. But he's never let that reflect anywhere. He's reported as it was with evidence. And I think there's a huge, huge lesson, more than anybody else, for the fraternity to which Premji belongs.
Absolutely.
Jitendra, what pains me today, that our working middle class, 45, 50, one child, two children, they know nothing about independence movement. And I have personally checked it, because I spent my winters in Goa. A lot of the last, since COVID, Goa has been dependent only on Indian tourists. It's no longer foreign tourists. And you talk to them, they know nothing. They are Gandhi, Gandhi. Congress, yes. We need to know all this. And we need to know that India has to protect itself from the traitors within. How is it done? I don't know, but it is must be done with an iron hand.
Absolutely.
That's my only request.
Very well said. Sir, since we have the benefit of your presence, I want to ask you a question. You have read this book cover to cover, and it was evident from your speech, Honorable Minister. You see, Premji makes some very interesting and very important points. One of the things he has mentioned, and I found it very interesting, that even now in Victoria and Albert Museum, there are crates of artifacts that are kept but they have not opened. There are also case of course, Shivaji's that sword, Bhavani, and of course that Vagdevi in that that temple in Mandu. So what is, I mean, I'm not please sir, pardon, Gustakhi Maaf, I'm not probing you. I'm just saying, what is government doing about these issues? If you can give some account of it.
I see, of course, I'll give a very wholesome answer to this. Again, I think this is too serious to be left to government alone. First. The second is, as Premji was mentioning, just to add to what he was saying, there's a famous adage in English language, the eyes see what the mind knows. The eyes see what the mind knows. Now the problem is, to pick up the point from where Sanjeev was saying, that he read about Ambedkar only after he joined civil service. He was never given an opportunity to learn about it when he was in a university school. And on the other hand, if you visit the London School of Economics, at the very gate you have a statue of Ambedkar. Which means, to supplement what Premji was saying, we have had extraneous considerations in deciding who were our icons. We were not objective in doing so. Now, if London School of Economics has put a statue of Ambedkar, and that is the first darshan that any new entrant into that school has, because he is immediately prompted to ask whose statue, and then he is told he is one of the best known global economists, and that is the first spark of inspiration instigated in that young boy or a girl who enters into that school. Whereas over here, it's the other way around. So, the history has been designed based on extraneous considerations, which has contributed to what it is like today, as Premji was mentioning. So, that is one thing. So, unless we do now, you're talking about museum, but even this statue, I hardly find any Indians. Now there are so many, I think half of elite India these days spends its summer months in London. All the film stars, and sorry, even my class, politicians, big ones who have their houses there. But I don't think anybody goes there. Not everybody knows that there's a statue inside. And it's in the middle of the heart of London. So the point is, as to what he said, it was the curriculum of syllabi was designed like that for reasons which are known. And B, as Premji is saying, the orientation of the young minds to train themselves to the legacy did not find its civilizational foundation in this country, because we have been evolving from one stage to other. 70 years is not a long span of life in the age of a nation. It's just, if tomorrow history is written, the 75 years, though we celebrate it because we are living through it, but history will not even devote a footnote of a chapter. It's written in eras.
Absolutely.
So we are still evolving. Even today, what are we? We are still an evolving civilization, evolving society in every way of life. That's why it's too serious to be left to go. If we are not, what are we? What is our lifestyle? Are we Western or Eastern? You start your day with a bed tea, you have a toast, then you have a dosa, then you have a chana bhatura, you end up with a pizza, what are you doing? So in anything, and that's why you also have all the diseases all over the world. The other day I had a group of these boys from Europe. They said they want to take up a health project. Somebody guided them to ask me. They said, "So what do you think should we work on?" I said, "You name the disease and I'll offer you one." So we have to now draw the bottom lines of our civilizational values, civilizational parameters in every sphere of life. And that would also be applicable over here. Now look here, this is my, now we are now talking in the terms of journalism also. It was till a few years back, and I think thanks to this government, that's now become a little, there's some innovation. It was fashion to question the very foundations of the nation, because that gave you the projection of being an intellectual or a pretension of being an intellectual. So these misconceived notions which have evolved over the years have evolved because we have still not drawn the lines, the bottom lines. And I think now when the cycle completes, that stage would happen. And gradually it's happening. And as I think the work done by Premji is one of the contributions to that. If our youngsters are not able to recall or not able to narrate what independence is all about, because you have deprived them of that. Why do you talk about Ram Sita? Because your grandmother taught you. Where is the grandmother of your grandchildren today? You see, most of the children which Premji is coming across in Goa are deprived of the grandma stories. We had a traditional, heritage of transmission of knowledge, of the traditional knowledge also happening. So they would tell us. My grandmother used to tell me about freedom struggle. And I tell you honestly, she told me once how she gathered women all over from all the villages just when they came to know that Gandhi was in town. Now, I don't think the children today would be narrated all those stories by their grandmother. The grandmother is too busy with her grand things. And the grandchildren. So
Operative part is grand things.
So I think we have to give a very deep thought to all this.
I would,
Sir, I just want to bring Sanjeev Chopra Sahab. Sir, he made a lot of very thoughtful, but question that you asked, I mean, I want to an answer of that. Can history be actually balanced? We all desire that history should be balanced, history should be nuanced, but is it possible? You are a historian, so you can answer that.
No, but one thing, I think if I possibly left you slightly disappointed from the point of view of the government, I think we have to raise history from the preferences of the political dispensation of the day. So that
All included.
All included, of course. That will happen only then. And I think that is now the course has started, at least in the last 1 decade or so. The getting back the artifacts, setting the course right. For the first time, you don't feel ashamed talking about Ambedkar. In fact, I was the one who held the first program on Sama Prasad Mukherjee in your JNU when Jagdishan took over. So I said, we have never had a symposium. So he said there will be a huge protest. And indeed there was. And we got publicity because of that protest. But then he said, if you discuss Sama Prasad Mukherjee's political things, I said history has been very unkind to Sama Prasad Mukherjee because unfortunately or fortunately he died in Kashmir. Otherwise, he was a great scholar and I think one of the greatest academicians of 20th century, much less a politician. In fact, he was Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University at the age of 34, when you had just 3-4 universities in the country, Calcutta, Patna, Madras, Bombay. So then he said, no, if it goes political, so we designed it like that. Sama Prasad Mukherjee as academician. So what I'm trying to say is that effort has at least now started. Otherwise, it was a taboo.
Yes.
Sama Prasad was taken someone as, out of the world. And if you read his convocation addresses, they are so enlightening, not an iota of divisiveness, separatism, or fundamentalism or extremism in that.
Yes.
So he has put it, and that's why the British rulers chose him to be the Vice Chancellor at a time when to become a faculty also in Calcutta, mostly it was unusual for an Indian. So I think now that has started. Now talking about Savarkar, I'm glad that in India International Center I'm also a member. We are talking about Savarkar without being watched by the big brother.
Not only that, you see the
important... because otherwise nobody would talk about Savarkar. And Premji has shown the courage of conviction to mention that.
So sorry.
Whatever I have mentioned is factual.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Because this is what happened there.
Absolutely.
The way Savarkar was beaten for opposing the resolution which the Indian Association wanted to pass there, condemning the killing of that Wiley. But Savarkar got up and he was beaten badly. So it's all there. And
in his book, Prakash ji writes that when the audience was asked to raise their hands to say yes for the resolution, he was the only one who said no and got beaten.
And
sorry. 2 points which I wanted to, because Rashid asked me about history. You see, what happens is that the documents and the facts remain the same. The title and the editorial will change the entire perspective. All the documents of India's freedom / independence from 1909 to 1947, starting from 1909 to the Indian Independence Act, which was the longest act ever made by the British government. The same set of documents has been published by Her Majesty's Commonwealth Office under the title Transfer of Power. The same set of documents has been published by ICHR as Towards Freedom. Now, the documents remain the same.
Very interesting.
It's the same set of documents. Now, it's a question of perspective. Now, the larger question is that if you say transfer of power, this means that power was legitimately mine. I mean, I can only give something which belongs to me, which then means that the British were actually in power not as an imperial power or an imperial authority, but a legitimate, from their point of view, the East India Company had two firmans. Look at it now from a purely legal point. It had a firman, sir, from Jahangir, and it had a firman from their king. So King James said that East India Company can operate in India, and you're the only ones who will operate in India. और यहाँ पे जहांगीर ने कहा कि you are welcome to operate in India. So actually, from their perspective, there was no illegality. There was no illegality, which brings us to the much larger question of what is legal. Is the law legal or not legal? And that is the point which the Honourable Minister had made. That is what Dhingra was questioning. That what is the law that you are talking about? The law that you are talking about is a law which you made, which you have imposed on us. And therefore only those laws are laws which are authentic and which are welcome. I just want to make one point, and that is that fortunately a lot of very good books for children history are being written now. I'll present to the Honourable and to Prem Prakash. There are books which have been now written, and they are written in a very interesting manner. There's a book which has been written which says History of India in 100 Objects. So those 100 objects are the HMT watch, those 100 objects include the Red Fort, those 100 objects include the Vijay Ghat, the Raj Ghat. So, there are different ways of looking at history. But today, if you want to tell a child that this is the history of India, he will not be interested. But if you put the HMT watch and then talk about, what India was, how India is now, so that's a different concept. So I think this is also happening. A lot of positive things are happening, and one of the things which you were trying to do at the academy was that in a history module, used to say that make a list of all the names that you know in history. Now rub them off and create new names, because there are so many people, so many heroes and so many heroes who've done so much of contribution to our country. Those are in our districts, they are lying in our community stories, in our family stories. So I think those hope to be resurrected, and we hope, sir, that many more books will come up.
Absolutely.
And there is so much history that has been ignored, and we need to resurrect it. Thank you very much.
My only request is to the Honourable Minister, please get this government to work on getting those two warehouses of Victoria and Albert Museum checked out. Because my information was from Victoria and Albert Museum, staff only, not hearsay.
No, I'll certainly get a small note from you, and we'll discuss it with the Culture Ministry officials.
I think that's a very, we are ending this evening on a very positive note, on a vibrant note. Fortunately, all good things come to an end. It's been a wonderful, interaction, and largely I am very grateful, all of us actually, to Dr. Jitendra Singh ji for not only making a wonderful speech but becoming part of this discussion. I just want to, before I hand over to word of thanks to the PK Foundation representative, this is a very well produced book. So I want to actually thank my friend Renu Kaul of Atasta Publication for producing this book.
सर हिस्ट्री दैट इंडिया इग्नोर्ड इस किताब के विषय में सर आपसे हम जानना चाहेंगे सबसे पहले।
हिस्ट्री दैट इंडिया इग्नोर्ड ये किताब जो है ये उन नौजवानों को क्रेडिट देती है, क्योंकि अभी तक तो सबको यही पता है सिर्फ कांग्रेस और गांधी जी का, वो भी लोगों को पूरा नहीं पता। मगर ये किताब जो है ये आपको सैकड़ों उन जितने मैं ढूंढ सकता था वो नौजवान लोग जिन्होंने हंसते हंसते फांसी के तख्ते पर चढ़ गए, न सिर्फ भगत सिंह और उनके साथी मगर और भी बहुत हैं। तो ये किताब सब उनके बारे में है।
क्योंकि वीर सावरकर जी का भी जिक्र इसमें है जुमला का।
बिल्कुल है।
तो उसके विषय
वो
में जानना चाहेंगे, जो आप साझा करते
सावरकर
हैं।
साहब तो थे वहाँ पर स्टूडेंट लंदन में, इंडिया हाउस में सब लोग इकट्ठे होते थे। तो जब मदन लाल ढींगरा जो उनके दोस्त थे नज़दीकी, उनको गिरफ़्तार किया गया, तो उनके ख़िलाफ़ एक रेजोल्यूशन पास करना चाहते थे इंडियन एसोसिएशन। तो सावरकर अपोज्ड इट, ही वाज द ओनली वन टू से नो। तो ये सारी वो भी चीज़ में है। और बाकी रही बात उसके बाद की, तो 11 साल थे वो, ही वाज इन, किताब में सारा मैंने डिटेल दी है।
जी
11 साल तक थे वो अंडमान में। ही रियलाइज़ कि मैं अगर यहीं रहा तो अंग्रेज़ तो मुझे मारना चाहते हैं यहाँ पर। तो ही ओनली सेड कि आई वोंट पार्टिसिपेट इन इंडिपेंडेंस मूवमेंट एनी मोर, एंड ही केम बैक टू यूनिफाई हिंदूज, दैट्स ऑल।
जी। और क्योंकि सर गांधी जी का भी जिक्र है, और आपने खुद ही जैसा कि मेंशन भी किया भगत सिंह जी का भी जिक्र है, तो उनके विषय में भी अगर जो बातें आप साझा इस
देखिए, गांधी जी की तो बहुत बड़ी कंट्रीब्यूशन है।
जी
गांधी जी ने इस मूवमेंट को, जब वो आए, मास मूवमेंट बना दिया, क्योंकि कांग्रेस उससे पहले एक तरह से क्लब थी, वो मास मूवमेंट बन गई इंडिपेंडेंस के लिए। और रही बात, दूसरा सवाल क्या था आपका?
भगत सिंह जी को लेकर भी है।
भगत सिंह तो खैर बहुत बड़े रेवोल्यूशनरी थे,
जी
क्योंकि लाला लाजपत राय को जब मारा गया
जी
तो उसका बदला तो लेना था ना।
जी
तो उन्होंने साउंडर्स को मारा, उन्होंने कहा कि हमने मारा है भाई।
जी। गांधी जी एक तरफ और दूसरी तरफ कांग्रेस, दोनों को कहीं ना कहीं एक डिपिक्ट करने की, जैसा कि हम चर्चा में भी सुन रहे थे, तो इनको अलग अलग आपने डिपिक्ट करने का किया है। कई कंट्रोवर्सी जाहिर तौर पर किस तरह से देखते हैं अगर
नहीं, गांधी जी की और कांग्रेस की अपनी कंट्रीब्यूशन है,
जी
और ये सब नौजवान जो और रेवोल्यूशनरीज है उनकी अपनी कंट्रीब्यूशन है।